So I'd like to talk about the challenges posed by population aging in the European context, and then try to discuss and dissect some of the solutions or answers that have been proposed, including migration, including job automation, again, another mutual interest of ours, and perhaps some other topics as well. And this is joint work where I should credit Emily Barker, my colleague at Southampton, who has done quite a lot of modeling work behind what I will be presenting today. So the four elements of the puzzle I will present in turn. I'll start by outlining the challenge, then we'll look into migration, into automation, robotics, and AI, and potential for these, and perhaps other ideas for addressing the challenges related to skills in aging Europe. But let's start from these challenges. Luckily for me, when I was preparing these slides 2 days ago, The Guardian had a very nice visualization of what they dubbed Europe's population crisis, which for a demographer is not something particularly new or striking. I think this is something that looking at population projections is something that we know pretty well about, but still. Seeing this visualized, the projected population change between now and the end of the century in different regions of Europe, based on the current baseline projections for the EU and supplemented by the British ones for the UK. You can clearly see that the green areas, so the areas that can exhibit or are expected to exhibit some growth in population terms, are invisible minority. Most of the areas are in the red. Most of the areas are set to decline, and that's even despite the fact that the assumptions on which these projections are based already include quite considerable migration flows. Population projection makers typically include some scenarios in which migration is assumed to be zero. So migration is assumed to be non-existent. And of course, we can toggle the graph to see and the map to see how the situation would look like if there was no migration at all. And then, basically the whole continent turns red. Some regions depopulating very intensely up to the projected reduction in size by 3/4 by the end of the century. And this is the dilemma. So this is these are the trends. The trends in demography, this is something that already the future population size and structure is, to some extent, I would argue that within a horizon of one generation, even to a large extent, encoded in the population of today. So today's 20-year-olds will become 40-year-old 20 years from now. Today's children born this year will become 20 years from now. We already know these starting populations. So here is the challenge. How can we respond to such a large change in terms of population size, and also what accompanies it is the change of population structure. What comes with it, and this is the topic of Link4Skills, and this is also something that we looked at, especially in the Future-S project, but also in Quantmic and other research, is the fact that when it comes to skills, Europe, as with other parts of the world, but Europe in particular, is very heterogeneous. So whether you look at the population with no or low education levels, the map on the left, or high tertiary educated, the map on the right, you will see that there is a lot of diversity even within the continent. And now, if you think about it, these maps showing the differences in skills juxtaposed with the expected demographic trends also seems to be setting different parts of Europe on different trajectories and different pathways when it comes to the future demand for skilled labor, for skills, and also the possibility of meeting this demand just by training people within these countries. So that's the conundrum. What has been the sort of typical responses so far? Okay, Europe is shrinking, population is aging, we all know that, but surely migrants will come and supplement the gaps in the labor markets that we see. Well, it turns out it's not as simple as it might seem. First of all, you have already seen in these two maps that even assuming standard migration trajectories does not solve the problem everywhere, does not solve the problem for all regions of Europe. And besides, it has been long studied, at least since the 2000 United Nations report called Replacement Migration. The idea that migration can somehow fill the demographic gaps and substitute for the fact that the population is aging has been revisited time and time again with the same conclusion: migration is not a long-term solution. And that conclusion holds pretty much regardless of which country in Europe we're looking at, or indeed whichever region of the world with sub-replacement fertility levels we're looking at. And this conclusion even holds sort of regardless of what metrics of aging we're using. It might be something to do with the average age, median age. It may have something to do with old age dependency ratios or similar measures of population age structures, or it can be something related to the time until the end of life, sort of the end, the last intervals in people's life courses. No matter which perspective we take, the conclusion is the same. Migration is not something that can alleviate the demographic pressures in the long term. Why is it the case? Well, migrants themselves age. Right? This is something that needs repeating every time this topic comes up. It's not enough to bring in people into a country and in the prime age when they are most productive and in the best health in the 20s and 30s, because then these people will themselves age and sort of move to the age brackets where they will retire. They will increasingly require a greater healthcare and so on. Migration in terms of the demographic dynamics, this is something that where demographers really have been trying to make this point across. It's not something that changes the fundamentals of the long-term demographic trends, because these trends are fundamentally driven by the fertility levels rather than anything else, and migration is but a modifier. You can see this in the population pyramids here on this slide, right? Starting with the population pyramid as we have it now in Europe, or now a couple of years ago at the beginning of this decade, and what we can project for 2060. You can see that the blue parts of the population pyramids refer to people who are either native born or born. The lighter shadings are those who are born in other European countries, and the red and yellow shades are those who came from other parts of the world. So even with reasonable numbers of people joining the European populations and labor force from abroad, we still see that the population pyramid, the shape of the population pyramid is moving up. We are getting more and more people in the higher age groups. So aging pretty much continues. Okay, migration in the short term can alleviate some pressures on the labor market, no doubt about it. But in the long term, if we were to be serious about filling the gaps left by population aging long term, the numbers would be implausibly high. So there are not enough migrants in the world to fill these gaps to start with. And this is also one of the reasons why talking about these processes moved from being just a technical exercise of demographers to something being politically charged. So whenever I teach my students about replacement migration, I have to caveat the term by referring that this is emphatically not what the sort of the conspiracy theory about replacing some populations with other populations, the great replacement or whatever the term. But the current consensus is that in terms of sustaining at least the size of the labor force in the short term, migration can help. But when it comes to the age structure beyond the next few years, we really cannot count on migration as a solution. And here, just to make another connection, both to the work we did in QuantMig and to the current work you're doing at Link4Skills, the graphs have been prepared by the team at IIASA, led by Michaela, as well, to whom many thanks for the excellent searchable and queryable tools that we have on our websites and that you can play with. And when it comes to different migration scenarios, so another thing that we explored in the past work in QuantMig was, how about trying different migration scenarios by which we would increase migration from different parts of the world to the sort of relatively high, rarely seen magnitudes. And yet again, the same story unfolded, which was that migration impact was short-term, was localized. So the story of replacement migration was retold yet again. And as you can see, regardless of which migration scenario we looked at, here depicted by different colors, the conventional measures of aging really didn't change much. So if not migration, then what? The other possible solution that has been mooted is, of course, automation, robots. In the last couple of years, we have algorithms and artificial intelligence. So this is something where we have, in addition to the demographic heterogeneity and the skills heterogeneity that we talked about, we additionally have automation heterogeneity even across Europe. So here is just a simple graph related to number of industrial robots per 10,000 workers in selected European countries, compared to the global averages both in 2016 and 2021. And you can see that the proportions vary a lot from really small, especially in Central and Eastern Europe, Bulgaria, Romania, the Baltic states, to Europe's current leader, which is Germany. But a big caveat here that this graph only shows industrial robots and excludes digital services and AI. And when it comes, for example, to digital services, the German economy is the one that is actually lagging behind some of the other European countries. So where can it take us? What we did in the Future S project was so Emily, as a macroeconomist, set out to create a very complex, very complicated model that would try to describe the interrelations of households, firms, in an economy which includes migration and which includes job automation as well. So the model itself, the technical name is a dynamic stochastic general equilibrium model. It's a monster of a model with a couple of hundred equations in it. But the whole point of doing such an exercise is actually to try not so much to predict something, because it wouldn't be really possible to predict anything to a reasonable degree of accuracy with such large models, but to try to see what if things change, if some policies change, or if firms make certain decisions not rather than other decisions, what might be changing in the whole picture as a result. And the main two pillars of this model in our case are the households and the firms. The households can comprise of both high skill and low skill people who are either native workers or migrant workers. Likewise, the firms are employing people from these households, and they also consider employing robots. And the decision-making processes for both households and firms. The households decide how much labor to offer on the labor market and how to spend the earnings. The firms decide how to produce the goods that they're producing by considering either human labor or robots. The model is complex, but what it enabled us to do was actually to cut across the complexity and come up with some findings that can be summarized very neatly in terms of what job automation can lead to, especially in the longer run, in such an economy where all these things are interrelated. So again, it probably won't come as a surprise to you, given that this is an area of mutual interest. But in the model, we have been able to demonstrate that investment in automation and the following automation of jobs can, in many scenarios, decrease the premium for skills. So people who have higher skills will be earning proportionally less if automation progresses. But at the same time, from the point of view of the labor market, what was not exactly expected was that the automation can also expand the demand for labor in some other places, because more people equipped with robots, especially the collaborative robots, the ones that Aleksandra has been exploring in her work, can be doing much more complex tasks than without these robots. Automation seems to be interacting with migration as well, because if the premium for skills is decreasing, then the migration draw of the destination regions can also decrease, because the wage gap between the destinations and origins can decline. Still, if automation is present in the regions of origin of migration, this can act as a factor that is driving people out for the same reason, because of the premium they get for the skills is lower. What we also looked at was the effects on the welfare of different groups of workers in this model. And this is something where we seem to be seeing, not unlike for similar analysis in the context of migration, but we seem to be seeing small positive effects on the welfare of the workers who are highly skilled, and either neutral or small negative effects of automation for workers who are low skilled. This is something that, especially in the context of the European social model, calls for a safety net. So automation is not, it seems that automation is not a process through which everyone wins. There will be people who will lose out on that, and hence the need to think carefully about how to tackle that challenge. And globally, automation can be expansionary for the economy, so the economy can grow, but the extent to which the economy can grow varies by country and varies also by the composition of skill in the labor force in a given country. But of course, these are the headline findings. But when we did the analysis, we were still left with quite a few questions that require answering. And the first, the fundamental ones of which is, to what extent are robots and humans, or algorithms and humans, complementary, and to what extent are they substitute? And this is a non-trivial question, because it depends not only on the level of skill required, but on a few other things. And there is another point that, again, something that I don't have to convince this audience of, but rather than talking about the automation of jobs or robots stealing our jobs, to put it colloquially, we should be probably more focused on the automation of individual tasks within the jobs. So there will be some tasks that will be easy to automate. It will make sense, economic sense to automate, and there will be some other tasks for which it won't be either so easy or desirable. And it all depends. It all depends on the sector. It all depends on the skills, and all depends on the nature of the task. And we all know that, routine, repeatable tasks. This is something which points towards substitution by robots, by algorithms. But whenever we're talking about unique tasks, and interestingly, these may be unique tasks at both ends of the skill spectrum, then in such cases, robots and algorithms may be more likely to be complementary to human labor, but in some cases will require additional investment. It will require investment in upskilling of the people who will be operating these robots or running the algorithms. And I said that this is something that works at the both ends of the skill spectrum. And the argument is that there is a relationship between complexity and of this task and economic viability of automation. So at the high end of the skill spectrum, we have the unique, the creative tasks, which by their very nature will be difficult to automate. But at the same time, at the lower end of the skill, there will be many tasks that will be uneconomical to automate. So think, hairdressing, or think, plumbing. The jobs that are very idiosyncratic, that may not require a PhD and sort of years and years of training, but still will be difficult to automate, because automating them would require an investment that's just not worth it in economic terms. So what other ideas might we have if migration is not an answer, at least in the long term? If with automation it's not so simple, what are the other options? One thing that I will flag from the beginning is that whatever we talk about will be very much country specific. So please bear that in mind. Given the heterogeneity that we looked at so far, whatever we come up with, whatever ideas we put together, will then the mix, the presence in the different solutions will vary between the countries. When it comes to some other ideas for the future skills of Europe, there is still a lot of untapped potential in terms of economic activity, especially for women, and quite crucially for people in the ages between the sort of mid-60s and mid-70s. Conventionally, this group was thought to be as the retirees, so people out of the labor market. Now there is, given that we are living longer, we are living healthier lives, there is a lot of mileage in looking into that group. The whole idea here is that the activation and reactivation of people in terms of the labor market is a solution that in the long run proves more promising. And it's also an investment, right? It's an investment in human capital. It's an investment in skills. And this is also something that will, in order to work, will probably require greater flexibility than what we currently observe on the labor markets. So what we're having, especially the current generations, there is the increasing talk about destandardizing of life courses. So whereas 50 years ago, people's life courses were quite similar in terms of the work and family and other aspects of their lives. Currently, people do more individual things. They do things at different pace. They do things in different order. So there is a less standardization in that. But that also requires, from the policy point of view, requires greater flexibility in order to accommodate as many people as possible. And of course, this whole discussion about activity and flexibility, we can't escape the question of pension reforms. This is something that, especially in some countries, is very politically charged, very sensitive, and it's yet another example of an area in which the long-term planning, long-term thinking loses to short-term electoral considerations. But this is a question that in the long term, I don't think that we will be able to escape from. And when it comes to automation, there is a need for, of course, investment. Everyone is doing that now. So Europe doesn't want to be left behind. But there is also a need for nuanced discussion on regulation with very serious questions about ethics and, crucially, accountability. If something goes wrong, what's my recourse, right? If an algorithm that I'm using brings about unintended consequences, whom can I sue, right? Whom can I take to court in order to sort of get compensation for that? So there are lots of questions that still need answering. And on the demographic side, I thought that if you haven't seen this, there's a sort of very nice demographic take of that in a TED talk by Jennifer Schuba, who's the CEO of Population Reference Bureau, a think tank based in Washington, D.C., with a provocative title about too many or too few people on Earth. But the part of the argument she's making in that talk is exactly about looking for solutions to demographic questions elsewhere, and the economic activation of people and groups who are not fully participating in the labor market to the extent that they would have otherwise wanted, is a very much part of this argument. So what are the key messages here? First, neither migration nor automation can solve, in scare quotes, the demographic challenges, but both will be parts of the picture. Especially when we think about automation as something that replaces tasks and not necessarily whole jobs, and that in many areas, as we already mentioned, right, people will work with complementary robots, with algorithms, rather than be replaced by them, the whole discussion can also become a less charged and less sort of tense. There is a paradox here, which we've mentioned just a moment ago, that it may be tricky to automate some of the tasks at the low end and the high end of the skill spectrum, but this also means that these are the medium skill tasks that may be most at risk of automating, and this is something where we need to pay attention just to make sure that no one's left behind. So in the European context, again, a mix of approaches may work and may be more sustainable in the long term. Automation, by all means, regulated AI can be expected to boost productivity, but it has to be matched with also adaptation to the changing technological landscape. So upskilling, but also ensuring that the safety nets are present for those whose tasks and jobs are displaced by the technological change. Increasing economic activity is a part of the picture, especially in the groups that have historically been having low activity rates but have a potential to have higher ones. And so is the increasing flexibility, recognizing that people will be taking multiple pathways throughout the life course, and that the system has to be flexible enough to cater for that. So instead of a conclusion, I was thinking about finishing with a quote from a fragment of a poem, All Washed Over by Machines of Loving Grace, poem from 1960s by Richard Brautigan. I like to think of a cybernetic ecology where we are free of our labors and joined back to nature and all watched over by machines of loving grace. What I like about this poem, I mean, if you have a look at the full poem on the website, if you have a moment. But what I like about it is that you can read it in so many different ways, because you can read it as this sort of cozy utopia where everyone works in harmony, or you can read it as a warning, or you can read it as a parody. The choice is yours. But one more thing before concluding, I would like, if you're interested in finding out more, Emily will be talking about, we'll have a more detailed talk on some of these issues, focusing on skills and robots and automation on the 1st of April on Population Europe in Touch with Tomorrow series. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jakub. It was great, in order, and nicely said, and with all the intellectual grace as well, and in-depth findings. Thank you so much, and I now would like to welcome our discussants, Professor Aleksandra Przegalinska, Dr. Michaela Potancokova. So let's start with Aleksandra, because we had demographer migration scholar, so now non-migration scholar, and then we come back to demographer migration scholar. I think it will be nice intermezzo. Aleksandra, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and obviously thank you to Isabella and the team for the invitation, and to Jakub for his presentation. So interesting. And by the way, Jakub, more recently, Machines of Loving Grace is also a title of a book by Dario Amodei, who is the author of Claude, an AI model that is a competitor to ChatGPT, developed by Anthropic, Dario's company. And among all the American tech companies pursuing yet better AI, general artificial intelligence, super intelligence, I think he is the only one who's really worried and stressed his concerns around artificial intelligence very loudly, when other ones were just talking about investments and how much to spend on infrastructure to build better AI. So that's just a little addendum to what you finished up with. But I think you touched upon so many important and interesting things, and maybe I'll start with the state of AI, because as Isabella pointed out too, I am not a migration scholar. I'm a scholar of artificial intelligence, mostly human-machine interaction. That's the field that I represent, together with our research team at Kozminski, and also at Harvard, where we collaborate with a group that is really focused on the future of work. And we are trying to understand better how not only human-machine interaction, but human-machine collaboration could look like in the future. And I think, it's very interesting, because you've used the term robots, and also here and there you mentioned machine learning, artificial intelligence. Obviously, AI is a very big umbrella term for many different technologies that are incubated within it. But I think the one that stands out right now is obviously generative artificial intelligence, and ChatGPT and all the similar models, including Claude, are, I think, the ones that have revitalized the discussion about, automation per se. Prior to that, we were thinking, well, to some extent, we do have predictive models and they can do some of the work for us. And when we were thinking about replacements, we mostly thought about robots, like physical machines that can replace some work. And then obviously some pieces of software here and there, you would think, yes, specialized work can be something that will vanish in the future. But everybody said, well, creative endeavor, however we define it and whatever it is actually safe, because that type of AI or technology per se does not exist. And for 2 years now, we have generative artificial intelligence, which is, as I said, just a part of AI, but it's very important for the discussions about, I think, the future of work. And I think we have an extremely interesting paradox here, because actually generative artificial intelligence has taken over some of the creative work that we have been doing. It's not so much tackling routine work. It's helping us out and probably making that routine work faster. So it is increasing productivity, and we can see in many different studies that we can go about routine tasks quite faster. Are we being replaced in the routine tasks? Well, not yet. We certainly still need to supervise them. But in creative work, there has been quite a shock, right? Because of all these models that are, well, not creative, they're generative, but they can generate results that we could still consider creative to some extent. So I think it's quite an interesting moment when you think about this whole tension between substitution and complementarity, where it really lies. Just an anecdotal thing, but I believe 3 or 4 years ago, Harari, who's obviously not an AI expert, but talks about AI quite a lot, has said or made a prediction, everybody who is working in specialized fields should be afraid because AI ultimately will take over, but culture is okay. Culture is safe. And now, 3 or 4 years later, here we are. And what we've considered creative work can be quite effectively done back to back by artificial intelligence, particularly by different types of AI agents and whatnot. And specialized work is still there. It's just done using very different software. So that, I think, is quite an interesting thing. It's remarkable, the shift that has just happened over the course of the past 2 or 3 years. What is also quite interesting, because you've mentioned robots so many times, robotics seems to be the least invested sort of in area of artificial intelligence. It's the area that constantly lacks funding, that constantly lacks, grants. And even though it feels like, well, some people are saying maybe, generative artificial intelligence will be sort of finishing soon, in the sense that generative artificial intelligence doesn't have much more to eat. It has eaten all of the knowledge that we've had, so we can use it, but it's not going to upgrade itself so much more, and we should actually be looking into the area of robotics. What remains to be true is that robotics is extremely hard. Creating a robot that could do some fine motoric activities is very, very hard, and there are plenty of obstacles in the field. So what we have managed to automate using quite simple robotics is something we've already achieved a while ago. And we would need to really accelerate this particular domain to see robots in all the other activities like services, where we don't see them, but we actually see quite a lot of human labor. So that, I think, is, quite interesting, that those robots that often come to mind when you think about, replacement, when you think about the future of work per se, is the area in artificial intelligence that I think is currently least developed. So that is quite a tension, and I think it makes us think about, the future. What could happen, where this complementarity and substitution perhaps will lie, taking into consideration that it might take 20, 30 more years to actually be at the level of development that we see in generative AI. Right. So in that area, I think we are quite far in robotics. Absolutely not. Now, another thing that I wanted to mention is, obviously, we work in this area of collaborative AI. So we are trying to figure out is really what are the patterns of collaboration with artificial intelligence. And obviously, there are plenty of different patterns. Some of them could mean substitution, but very often they don't. Right. So when you are working on parallel with AI, and the AI is doing one task, you're doing another task, and that all ends up in being, a final output. It's, a parallel type of collaboration, we could say. So very often we would delegate a minor routine to artificial intelligence, and it's going to work without our supervision, but the results of that work will come back to our bigger task that we are working on. That's quite often the case. But there are plenty of ways in which we can collaborate with artificial intelligence, and obviously this parallel work is just one of the examples. There are many others. We could think about, more synergistic types of collaborations where AI can be our coach, our mentor, our critic, help us out as a sort of sparring partner, or perform jobs together with us. And quite often in creative work, you could also deal with such patterns of collaboration. And when you think about collaborative AI, the studies that we've seen, they were also proving a boost in productivity, not only expressed in time, but also expressed in the quality of that work. And that was the case until last week, I would say. So you would see lots of studies that were done, and they said, oh, well, AI won't probably do much on its own, but when it works together with humans, you might expect quite spectacular results when it comes to productivity, both expressed in time and in the quality of work. And last week, we just saw this study that said that whenever we are dealing with a gifted person or a person who is very skilled in a certain area and works really well, the performance of that individual is assessed as very high, then artificial intelligence kind of flattens that result. So in a way, you don't see spectacular results when you are working with AI. You see quite the opposite, that in many cases, when you have an extraordinary good individual working on a certain task, when AI is added, it's actually not going to be as good anymore. So this is, I think, quite a fascinating discussion, and also yet another study, a similar one focused on collaboration with AI by Malone and others that was, I believe, published in Nature Communications recently, was about the fact that actually in medical area, you can have humans working alone and AI working alone, and then the results will be great. But actually, when they collaborate, the results are not so great. So what I'm trying to say, it's very confusing currently, right? It's a confusing moment. 2 years ago and a year ago, we would see evidence of this collaboration actually being very fruitful, giving you kind of, very net positive outcome. And currently what we are seeing after 2 years of practicing our collaboration with generative artificial intelligence are very different avenues, which I think to some extent can indicate that it's not so easy to say what's going to happen next, right? Companies are certainly looking on how to implement artificial intelligence so that it works for them. But since they still do not see major ROI on their investments in artificial intelligence, I think these are not clear trajectories, right, or of future automation and the scale of that automation. I think we might be surprised to see how much work will still be done by humans in the near future because of the things that we are discovering right now. And maybe, last thing that I would add to it is maybe I'll make a reference back to the meta-analysis that we've carried out with Isabella, with Konrad, with Agnieszka. Because I think our major discovery is not really about the impact of AI on automation as it currently stands, but the sole fact that there's just not enough research on it, that the evidence is extremely scarce, that we don't know much, and because of that, it's very hard to formulate even policy recommendations of any sorts. We did see some net employment impact based on the studies we saw, the ones that we analyzed. We could see that the overall effect of automation on AI and employment in EU is sort of very modestly positive. But our major discovery was that there's just so little work done in comparison to what is really happening, right, in these areas. I actually participated in a seminar at Harvard last week where there was still a very speculative hypothesis that we are not seeing job losses, massive job losses when it comes to artificial intelligence. So substitution is not really happening. About this complementarity and collaboration, we still don't know. That's vague. However, what is being observed already is that the companies are not hiring more. They are focusing on reskilling within the organization rather than attracting new workforce, which can be important also, for the migration patterns, I think. And for me, well, as far as I know, and that I'm obviously, not an expert on your field, but when you think about this high-skilled migration, low-skilled migration, I think for a very long time, there was this lens through which we would look on these topics, and we would say, well, low-skilled migration is threatened by emerging technologies whatever they are. We don't need to define them. It's just simply going to threaten low-skilled migration, whereas high-skilled migration might be fine. And I think this very approach is really challenged right now because of generative artificial intelligence, but also because of a lack of progress in areas like robotics that we would kind of think about as maybe substitution for this low-skilled migration. That is certainly a very cumbersome task to build a robot that can do all that job, because jobs that we very often consider low-skilled do require different types of abilities. It's usually a subset of very different tasks. And for a physical machine, doing all these tasks together is very hard to perform, not to mention battery life that currently would allow such a machine, even if you build it, to kind of perform something for 15 minutes or 30 minutes and not longer, right? Big question here, whether that makes sense at all. And I think that's something that Jakub also referred to. So yeah, I think we're in a very interesting moment. Some of the assumptions that we've had even 2 years ago are very much challenged by more recent work. And on top of that, still, I'm very glad to see projects like your project, like Izabella's project, kind of intersecting, because a really mind-blowing discovery for us during this collaboration with Izabella was to actually see with our own eyes that we have so little studies, and it's very hard to go forward without more data. So that's, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Aleksandra. That was great and food for thoughts for everyone. And now, without further ado, I invite Dr. Michaela Potancokova from IIASA, our partner in Link4Skills, responsible for modeling of skill shortages and scenario building. But now the floor is yours to reply to Jakub. Thank you.
Thank you. I first want to say, it was fascinating. I got really never heard so many new ideas as in these 15 minutes as Aleksandra spoke now about something that I don't know that much about myself, but it's really fascinating how it challenges our kind of misconceptions, stereotypical views, and I think many of these stereotypical views are also linked to demography and what we think about future labor force. And this is something I've been working quite a bit here with the team at IIASA and also with Jakub in Quantmic, and it's fascinating to see where our trajectories go now, view with futures, and we are trying something less complex, I have to say, in Link4Skills, but more looking from the perspective of human labor force and future labor force. And so what are these, what I would touch upon more and start where Jakub left us with this untapped potential. Right. So when we think about demographic change and we hear about population decline, we always see the same charts about decline in working age population. Right. So we know for a long time, this is basically demographic momentum that is given for a very long time. We know that the working age populations are gonna be declining in Europe. But does this really mean that labor force would decline in the same way? And the research that's already been done clearly shows that we cannot put equation mark between the two, because we know very well that working age population, which is often in the media or in policy discourse kind of exchanged with labor force, is only potential labor force. Now we know that not everyone works fully to their potential. And Jakub already mentioned that demographers for, I would say, at least more than a decade, if not longer, have been pointing to where these untapped potentials are. We know that it's with the older workers, but is it the same for every older worker? When we talk about policy reform, what kind of new social contract we need there? What are the just transitions here? Because oftentimes we think that giving the same to everyone is justice, but it may not be justice, because we know that when we also, for example, only look at mortality patterns by education, there are big gaps also in Europe in how long people live, men, women, with low skilled, high skilled, low educated, high educated, and how long they can actually be productive in the labor force, and also we know that there is a big potential of women who are not activated in the labor force. So we, as demographers, have been pointing to this for a long time, and the questions are for me also, where are we doing better? And where are we doing well? Where are we not doing so well, and what we can do better? In the simulations that my colleagues here at IIASA and we did in the past, what we know very well is that this untapped potential of women is very much is even more true for migrant women. And whenever we speak about migration being like kind of long-hanging fruit and simple solution to labor shortages in Europe, I think it's the migrant women who are the most left behind. And there we know that there is big potential to activate this labor force and to bring them to bring also migrants who face challenges to fully working to their potential in our economies. Now, the other question is why this is still happening. Why are we actually so bad at migrant integration? Because whenever we do simulations, what actually gives really big, where it really makes a difference is how fast you actually allow people to work and how fast they integrate in the labor force. We know that this is still not working very well. That, for example, for non-European male immigrants, it takes about 10 years to reach the activity rates of native-born men in European countries. And for women, this gap never closes, in fact. So when we talk about migration, often the discourse is very much in a simplistic way that we immediately can put these people to do this labor. But we are actually not very good at doing that in at least the first decade. Many of these people are in our countries. So there's a big gap there. It's not easy, and it's probably doesn't have really easy solutions. Where we also can have to look at and can do bit better with respect to actual skill development. And this is something that is really crucial because this is not a linear trajectory. And we see that skills, in terms skills, there's big discussion whether skills are actually stagnating, whether with educational expansion that we have achieved and that is ongoing, and we know that less educated cohorts through demographic metabolism will be replaced by more educated cohorts. Are we also talking that these people would be able to maintain their skills, or new generations being more skilled than those who are coming? And there are big challenges that we can see already from Bijak and IIASA measurements that in fact there are some types of skills where we don't see improvements, especially functional literacy skills, reading skills. We have seen big declines actually in performance of adults with this respect. Now, the fascinating question would be how this is actually linked to technologies that we are using. And what does it mean for future, how people can be engaged in their jobs, how maybe these interactions that with robots is one of the way to bridge this. But I think there is a lot of this also requires really more nuanced understanding of these like educational transitions that our societies are experiencing. And especially what we can do as demographers, we can point to it and imagine that if really more people are reskilling throughout their careers, this is something that we can achieve, and this would be the impacts. But I think the hard part is really how this can be achieved, and how sometimes the policy measures that are put forward are used, and whether they are used really again, to facilitate these just transitions. Now, this will be very anecdotal, but it's very Austrian. I'm living in Austria, and there is one policy measure in terms of reskilling that Austrian government put forward a few years ago, and it's called educational leave. So if you are a worker and your employer allows you to take this educational leave, then it was meant basically for maybe mainly older workers to have this opportunity to retrain to different roles within companies, or to be able to find a job then within the economy with these improved skills. And last year was the first assessment of how this reform actually worked in Austria. And the results really shocked me, because it turned out that most of people who took this educationally were right after university. So it didn't really end up targeting the older workers, but people taking additional courses to after their training, and women after maternity leave, basically women prolonging their parental leave with their children. So did we really succeed? Like, sometimes the good solutions are proposed, but then what can we do actually to make these measures work for those who would mostly benefit from them? And I think here is really, really huge challenge laying ahead. Also, when we talk about skill matching and skill shortages, how much of this is something that we create through the modeling exercises or the assumptions that we are actually putting in these exercises? Now, in Link4Skills, now when we were investigating how to actually set assumptions on future labor demand in Europe, because labor demand, we are pretty good at, I think, at modeling the labor supply, but the matching labor demand is not so easy, because these two parts of the model have to always communicate, right? But it's very uncertain. How do we measure this labor demand? There are many simplifications. We match one vacancy to one worker. We know that many people work part-time, many people work in different countries, that these vacancies are posted, etc. Not easy. But also sometimes what we came across is that these labor demand projections that actually then result in results, oh, this would be the shortage of high-skilled or low-skilled workers, are based on very simplistic linear extrapolations. So I'm not saying that there won't be labor shortages or the labor mismatches don't exist. Labor mismatches especially, like, I think there we can do way better to remove barriers to people using their qualifications and their potential better in our labor markets. But when we are talking labor shortages, I started wondering how much of this is the artifact of our relatively simple thinking, and how much this would really be real shortage. Because the shortage also doesn't only mean that the employers cannot find workers. The solutions can be that employers maybe are looking for workers who or set their standards too high. Like recently, we were laughing with my colleague here in the office that we've seen an advertisement where employers were looking for experts in AI that have 15 years of experience. So this is also part what we have to deal with when we are trying to work with this labor demand data. So like sometimes employers are putting forward expectations that are a bit too high. So part of this shortage is probably coming from a bit of a wishful thinking that everyone is trying to get like the best possible. We also know that labor conditions in certain sectors and jobs are really not appealing. And there is probably part of the shortage that can be alleviated by addressing workers' needs. And yeah, so there will be probably shortages, but the question is how many of them would there really, how many of them we can really mitigate through different measures than just thinking about like, oh, let's get more foreign workers. And then if we attract these migrant workers to our economies, we have to think through really a process that we allow them to use their full potential, to remove often administrative barriers to their employment, like recognition of degrees and other barriers, and also allow these people like prosper in our societies fully. Like this would be something maybe I would end with, because we still want to have some general discussions, right? I don't know if
yes, exactly. So final word, and we go. Yes, it's perfect time to end. I thank you, Michaela. Thank you so much. Jakub, I don't know if you want briefly react to your discussions.
Yes.
Or we open the floor to all participants. So please react briefly, and then we collect questions to you, to discussants from our participants.
I just wanted to say thank you both to Aleksandra and to Michaela. It's been a fascinating discussion, and what both of you, the theme that was coming through to me clearly was the transition, right? We are undergoing a transition. Now we are in the middle of it. Things are changing, especially the technological side of it. Things are changing at a pace, right? We don't know exactly which way it's going. I really like, Aleksandra, what you said about unintended consequences, because we are sort of in migration studies, we're rife with that as well. So this is this is bound for my heart to hear that you are observing that too, which means that I think the things aren't that in this area, that things aren't so predictable as some people might have wished, is actually a good thing, because it means that there is opportunity. That we are undergoing a transition and things are in flux. We are at crossroads. It means also that if someone takes initiative in a good way, right? This can be for the to do as what Michaela called sort of a just transition, and probably a new form of a social contract, which will be a part of it. And I think that the other thing that came to me quite clearly is that we don't know much, right? AI as such has been around for decades, but generative AI is a new thing, and we don't quite know whether it's sort of more of the same or it's a completely qualitatively different thing. But I think, Aleksandra, I think you're very right. This is something where the social and technology studies, broadly understood, have a role to play, and have sort of the concerted research efforts into understanding things as they happen will be quite critical. But no, thank you for lots of food for thought, and for some of the references, which I'll make sure to follow.
Thank you very much. So let's open the floor. You have two options: either raise your hand and ask your question orally, or write in the chat. I will keep the chat open. So please, the floor is yours. Gottfried, you want to ask the question? Yes, the floor is yours.
Yes. I apologize. I thank you for 3 wonderful presentations, extremely rich. But listening to you, I had the feeling there is a kind of consensus that there will be labor shortage, or there are labor shortages because of demographic transformations, technological and economic. The answer, if I listen to you correctly, is a kind of policy mix. So we need specific migrants. It is important, smart job automation, active labor market policies to rethink them, that people work longer, lifelong learning, policy reform. So I think we're struggling. These are, I think, the answers we now are providing. And the question is, what should be the priority? What will be the ratio between these 4 or 5 ingredients for Link4Skills? Because we're dealing with migration, we're dealing with changing an active labor market policy, job automation. Could you speculate on that? I'm a sociologist. Unintended consequences are the key theme of my study, to tell you the truth. But are we able to anticipate some of these unintended consequences and came up with a kind of wise policy suggestions? Thank you for. I apologize for this long question.
Yes, thank you. Let's collect a bunch of questions. So Homi is now, so Gottfried was from Erasmus University Rotterdam, and Homayun Shirazi from our Toronto Metropolitan University partner, also Link4Skills. Homi, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jakub, for your nice presentation. I have more technical questions, 2 questions. First of all is about the model. So as you know, DSG models usually consider deviations from the long-run trend, but when it comes to migration or demographic factors, they are more like long-run factors that they variate actually during long period of time. So I was curious about the model that you're using, like that model for migration and demographic factors. How did you adjust the model to include those factors? And another one is why didn't you use the search models when it comes like to the labor market and different skills? Usually in economics we use search models. Why did you like pick the DSG model? So that's all my questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more questions for now for this round? So let me ask also my question: did you find, Jakub, any correlation between decrease of demography of the population, shrinking population, so shrinking hands to work, so to say, and automation? Have you come across this kind of correlation? This is one, and the other is, what about digital skills of older cohorts? They are very difficult to upscale, and you said that one of the policy options will be to go to those around retirement age and farther, and they are the most difficult to be skills for the skills we actually will need for the very near future. So the floor is yours. Jakub first, and then maybe Aleksandra and Michaela want to also add on something. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, okay, so I'll answer in the reverse order. So Isa, starting with your question, the correlation between decrease of population decline and automation is not clear cut. You will have examples like even in Europe, right? The traditional automation investment in the industrial robots in Germany, despite relatively sort of low fertility levels and for the past, I don't know how many, 4 or 5 decades, if not more. So it is a mixed bag, and when it comes to digital skills, especially for amongst older cohorts, I mean, this is something I fully agree with you. It's there is the practical question of how to achieve that, right? But I think that from what we are seeing, it seems to be that that's the direction of travel. It's how to get there is the question. I don't know, Aleksandra, whether you had anything sort of from your angle, whether you have seen anything on that in the literature. But I think from what my end, it would be a challenge. On the technical questions, the DSG model, why not a search model? I mean, yes, as they say on the BBC, other models are available whenever they mention a product by brand. So that's definitely one of the options. I'm not saying it's the best one, but it's the one we went with. Search models, I mean, that would be an interesting avenue to try, because then you can sort of focus on the mechanism by which matches are made. So more than we do it in the current incarnation. To me, the DSG has a appeal in that it's a macro level model, but with micro foundations. It has a stochastic component to it. And when it comes, I mean, you were absolutely right in your sort of with your first question, the demographic sort of the demographic trends, the long-term demographic trends, we were mainly taken as given, but migration wasn't, and automation investment wasn't. So in a sense, we used those to examine there's a word that economists like using, which is shock, right? I don't, with apologies to sociologists here, which is that I'll use it in a technical sense, right? So migration quote-unquote shock to the system, which means a higher than expected number of migrants coming, or a sort of higher than benchmark level of automation capital investment or something like that. So in a way, we took migration apart from the demographic dynamics and used it just as a variable that could be then subject to changes. And hopefully your questions, it's about the mix of policies, which is I guess part of my argument is that when you look at you can't really give a prescription for a ratio of the different elements, because it will be so idiosyncratic. Different countries will have different, it will be in different places. And I know it's sort of only answering half of your question, but there's still gaps in terms of the rollout of the technology, even within Europe, even within the EU. So there will be some countries which will have quite a lot of potential, quite a lot of mileage to gain by going in that direction. There will be countries that, due to the certain features of the labor market or certain features of the economies, will have some sectoral issues that will require, that will basically make some of the solutions less viable, or sort of the low-hanging fruit have already been harvested. So I think that in the work that I was showing, and Emily will be talking about this in more detail when she gives her talk in April. We looked at 4 case studies. So we looked at Sweden, Germany, Italy, and Poland, just to cover the different corners of Europe. And for all of them, the sort of the greatest gains were in different places. So I think that's me. Thank you.
Yeah. Aleksandra, yes, I wanted to ask Aleksandra. Michaela, would you like to add before we go to the last round of questions?
Well, I just wanted to refer back to Hartfried's comment on, the policy recommendations. Just remember that like 2 or 3 months ago, the Polish Ministry of Labor and Employment was sort of playing with the idea of creating a list of professions that should not be performed or executed by AI. And it was like a very strange sort of initiative, because we were not certain whether that means that you cannot have any degree of AI in these professions, so they have to be protected thoroughly from AI. Or is it so that, we kind of think that human supervision is inevitable and has to stay in these professions? And it was never explained, and then I think this initiative dies. But it only shows that actually formulating these sorts of policies, it feels preliminary at this point. What we know for sure is reskilling seems to be a big thing, and perhaps reskilling should not be in the hands of tech giants that come with their investments and with their skilling programs that are usually just focused on their own tools, right? That's not how it should happen. And the educational sector has to keep up somehow. So this is very important. And this reskilling or upskilling, it's probably more robust than just onboarding your employees to a particular piece of technology that is important now. It's a very big shift, and I don't think it's addressed, but that one is a given. The rest of it, playing with those ideas coming now from the Silicon Valley, like universal basic income, or like a 4-day work week, which we have heard as well during the Polish elections. These are, to me, extremely ephemeral at this point. They come and go, and I don't think they are sort of staying in the discourse in any more meaningful way.
Okay, Michaela, would you like to add something, or we go to the last round of questions?
I would actually have a question myself on the automation.
Yeah, so let's, Nurlan was first, then we have one in the chat. So please, Jakub, Michaela, and Aleksandra, have a look at the chat, because we have one common question there. And there is Nurlan here, who recently joined our Kozminski Doctoral School. Nurlan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, everyone, for a very interesting discussion. I would like to ask a little bit big picture question here. Professor Bijak, especially in terms of productivity of AI and automation technology. Do you think that the productivity effect of such technologies will translate into shared welfare, or it will cause or widen inequality? I'm asking this at across all levels, like global, regional level, country level, social class level, especially considering shrinking middle class. And do you think that such trends like widening inequality across those dimensions might make migration inevitable and eventually lead to, let's say, mass migration around the globe? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And let's address the question from the chat. Rob Davidson. Rob, I don't know if you like to pronounce yourself, or shall I read it? Are you with us still?
I'll go ahead and read it.
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you everybody for the insightful presentation. And I was just wondering, as you know, AI and automation, digital and robotic replace and displace entry-level roles, how are senior level talents going to be developed in the future? And in particular, is there a need for economy-wide apprenticeship institutions and programs that would help us bridge that human talent gap, and regulated apprenticeship institutions?
Okay,
I responded in the chat, and I'm happy to give the floor to Jakub. I think we see it particularly in programming currently. We will soon have no seniors because we're not hiring any juniors. And it's absolutely, I think your question is spot on. Just leave it.
Absolutely. And I said sort of as a university teacher, right? This is something that this should be the raison d'être of our existence, right? The pipeline, building in the pipeline, making sure that the skills are being developed all along, right? And that because at some point we're running the risk of I wouldn't say forgetting the technology. That's probably not going to happen. But having sizable gaps in the throughput of skills, which as you said, Rob, correctly, this is a lifelong journey that needs to be seen in that context.
Michaela, briefly your question, and then reply to Nurlan, and we need to finish. Yeah.
My question would be like, when we've been talking about these trends like in very general way, but probably when we also talked about this, you raised it Ola, about medium skill jobs, right, being more the threat. Like, what would be like impacts? Do you think there would be different gendered impacts of adopting these technologies, or are we also thinking of these technologies too much, and like what other policies, as Gottfried mentioned, that we need to be a policy, which are we like kind of putting behind, thinking that the technology would solve it? So where we would need maybe less technology, and what do we need to think more as complement to this technology?
Okay, thank you. Jakub, you have now 3 minutes for two big questions.
Michaela, I mean, the massive, right? I think Nurlan's question is easier in that I can bat it away by saying that's a matter of democratic choice, right? That how much of the productivity will trickle down to reduce inequalities may be a matter for elected politicians to decide. And of course, it's just me hiding behind the democratic mechanisms here. But in a way, that's a general feature of a capitalist economy, right? That the productivity, by whom are the gains of the productivity increases harvested? And I think that technology will be no different here. And Michaela, your question is actually, I don't know whether we have enough knowledge to answer it, to be honest. Whether that's not something that, as Aleksandra said, that we are still in the area where things are changing so fast that we don't have the required information to give an answer to that question. I mean, it's a fascinating moment to live through. I mean, no doubt about it. But at the same time, I think we need a bit more of solid grounding before we make conclusions. Is it a good sort of finishing line, Lisa?
I think so. No, the best is the poem, but I think you don't have the second one, or the second lyrics part of the poem at hand. So I think it's a good one. So thank you very much to Jakub for a great talk, to Aleksandra and Michaela for great contributions to this discussion. And you see, we see how fruitful it is to again come together with the different disciplines and have a dialogue. We learn from each other. So that's something which is always enriching us as scholars, but also those who are from the policymaking side here in the room. So thank you for all the 30 participants we had in the room, and please also feel invited for the next talk in the advisory Link4Skills Advisory Board Lecture series. Sorry, this is another one, but we have two. The next one will be chaired and discussed by Hotfried with Professor Monique Kramer from Dutch Migration Council, Advisory Council, about balanced labor mobility, targeted labor migration policy for general well-being, with all the political changes in the Netherlands. It will be interesting. And the second one in March, from the other side of the globe, from Ghana, labor migration and fair recruitment for decent work, addressing irregular migration, by Charles Quenin, who is also with us today. So thank you very much to all of you who found time to come to our series. Please keep an eye open on information about forthcoming lectures, and good evening. Have a nice evening and afternoon, or whatever part of the day you are now experiencing. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.